everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. I'm here with a very special guest today to talk all about the Wheel of Time, his new book, as well as some meetings with Robert Jordan. There's going to be all kinds of great stuff in today's video. You're not going to want to miss it. It's Jason Denzel. He's the founder of Dragonmount. He is an author. He does all kinds of stuff with the Wheel of Time. He's pretty much personified in the Wheel of Time community as the ultimate Wheel of Time fan, if that makes any sense at all. So Jason, thank you so much for being here with us today. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing with Dragonmount and your new books, as well as your current books that are out right now.
Well, first of all, John, thanks for having me. What I'm
Absolutely.
doing is I am hanging out with you. I'm like, I feel like, that it's been too long since I've had a chance to come on here, and I'm so glad to meet you, have a chance to talk with you. The things that you're doing with, the wide range of reporting and news and everything, it's impressive. And yeah, I've got you bookmarked. I'm following on all your social media. You are one of my go-to resources for things. Dragonmount reports on a slightly different variety of news topics than you guys do, but I am, in order to stay plugged into what's going on, you are a resource for me, and I'm so
Well,
grateful for
thanks so
that.
much.
And
I
it's
appreciate that.
awesome to, yeah, it's awesome to be here. And thanks for having me on. So,
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
what
You're
I
welcome. Absolutely welcome.
Yeah, so I've like you said, I'm the founder of Dragonmount, which these days is a website and a part of the Wheel of Time community, a proud
Mhm.
member of the overall global Wheel of Time community. I've got a lot of wonderful people that are contributing to the site, both on our YouTube channel, our social media, and Instagram, and on the front page, and everywhere else. This is going to be, actually, we just recently, last month of September, we just had our 24th year anniversary.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
24 years old, which is absolutely crazy to me that I've been doing it this long. And but at the same time, this is, I think, probably the most exciting time to be a Wheel of Time fan.
Oh,
Obviously,
absolutely.
yeah, with the TV show coming out, there's just like the books, there's exciting times and there's some
There's the
lulls.
lull in between,
Listen,
and we're in the lull
but
right
yeah,
now.
there certainly was, the community slog from 2013 through 2000, let's say
Yeah.
20, and where not as much was happening, with everything. And so, but this is, what an awesome time to be around, and not just because of the TV show, but because the TV show is bringing out so many new fans
Yep.
and new content creators like yourself.
Hmm.
Before, there was a time where it was me and Matt Hatch running Theoryland and Tarvalin.net and maybe a few others, and that was
That was
it.
pretty much it.
There
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of it. Now there are so many people, and it's fantastic to meet them all. Here we are. So in addition to Wheel of Time stuff, and working with Robert Jordan, his publishers, that all kind of mixed well with
Hmm.
my my uh, love of creative writing, and so it kind of morphed into my own writing career. And so I have my book trilogy out, the Mystic Trilogy, which book 3, Mystic Skies, is out today, October 11th. It is out.
Releases
It is
today.
available. So, yep. And so the entire trilogy is available. You can binge it, the whole thing. Books 1 and 2 are on sale for $2.99 this month, through the end of this month, through Halloween. And so this is a great time to dive in and check it out. So
So I've left links to the books down below in the description box if you folks want to check them out and purchase them. Why don't you give us just a quick Cole's Notes, a quick synopsis of the series and what it's about, so the folks at home know what they're getting into when they purchase them.
yeah, so this is an epic fantasy series, and it's an epic fantasy trilogy. And ultimately, at its heart, it's about the life of a woman who is trying to become a mystic. And this story spans, it's a generational saga. It spans nearly a century's worth of time. And so, in the first book, the main character, Pamela, she's a young teenager. She defies law and tradition and runs away from home to try and become an apprentice to this mystic who's living out in the woods. And it's a time of great political upheaval, and things are changing. And she's a commoner; she's forbidden from using magic. And so this is her way of trying to sneak in and try and become a mystic. And then the later books follow her at other stages in her life. A lot of people may be familiar. It's a little outdated, but the trope of the maiden, mother, and crone. It's a very mythological idea, and so I play off of that a lot. In mine, I if you look at the back of the book, it says apprentice, mystic, and master. And so what it is that it's following these stages of her life throughout, and how her progress and the way her embracing this magic is very natural, druid-like magic, I suppose. I've never used the word druid, but if you're a gamer, it's kind of got that kind of earthly vibe to its magic. So that's what's about. And it covers a long time period, and I'm so excited that the third one's out and done.
Out today.
And because
out today, yes.
Out today, and not just because it's out, but because that's like when I began this series, I knew how the books would end, and I knew how the big exciting stuff, and it's awesome to finally get to tell that part of the story. It's kind of like, if you, again, using like a gaming analogy, right? Like book one, there's like the low level stuff, which is fun. It's great. It's great or whatever. But book three in Mystic Skies, I'm able to like pull out like the level 8 and 9 spells. You know what I mean? I'm able to like pull out the big guns and do some really wild, some really awesome magic. But it's all character driven and everything. The experience has been amazing to write it all out and get it out there.
That's awesome. So again, folks at home, if you guys want to check that out, down below in the description box is a link to where you can purchase those books. I highly recommend it. I did get a chance to read them, and they are fantastic. Just so you folks know, I really do enjoy them. But now we're going to shift gears just a little bit. We're going to talk about the Wheel of Time. But before we do, I have to give a bit of a spoiler warning, because, of course, since we're talking Wheel of Time, we're going to be talking about everything and anything to do with the books in the show. So, spoiler warning, in today's video, we're going to ruin all kinds of aspects of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. So if you have not read New Spring all the way up to and including A Memory of Light, that's book 14 of the Wheel of Time, be forewarned, character arcs and plot points will be ruined from that entire series. Also, if you haven't seen the Prime Video show, that's episodes 1 through 8 of season 1, we're going to talk about that too, so we're probably going to ruin all kinds of stuff from that. So there, spoiler warnings off the screen, last chance to turn away now, and if you haven't, Egwene dies during the last battle, just so you know. All right. I'll get some hate for that down in the comments.
So I love it, but that's harsh.
And my boy Gowan had something to do with it, just so you know. So yeah, Wheel of Time, it's an iconic series. A lot of people have their own personal stories when they talk about it. I know I have my own. I've read it a ton of times. I first picked up the first book when I was 9 years old, just after Christmas in 90. And I had to wait in between all the other books, and I've read them so many times, and I love them so much. But I want to hear about your story. When did you first find the Wheel of Time? How did you pick it up? How did you get into the series itself?
My experience with the Wheel of Time books is unique, and I the beginning starts fairly simply. I was actually I picked them up in the early 90s. I want to say I probably purchased the first couple books in like 1992 or 3. So I was essentially like a freshman in high school at the time. And what it was for me was, do you remember, I should have had it because I have it upstairs. But do you remember the science fiction and fantasy book club? I don't know if you remember those, but they would send you these things in mail. Yeah, it was one of those things where, for those who aren't
12 books for $1 or whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly. You would get 12 books for $1 or maybe even a penny. I forget what it was. Like they literally had sometimes where you would like put like a quarter, you would tape a quarter to like an envelope and send it into them. They'd send you like 6 books or something. And so I decided to sign up for this. I was a big fan of various things, and I had just after going, devouring all the Dragonlance books, I devoured everything else by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and then I went on to, I don't know, David Eddings and Tad Williams and some others. But I was looking at this catalog, and I was flipping through it, and the cover that drew me was the cover of The Dragon Reborn. Rand is reaching for calendar, the original
Yep.
US cover
The
where
red
Daryl Sweet
background
with
kind
the
of
red background,
pops.
yeah,
Yeah.
where Rand is reaching for it. And I was like, this looks amazing. Like, I don't know, like I still think it's an amazing cover. I still love it for what it is. But in my 14-year-old mind was like, I need that. And so I was like, I'll grab that book as one of my six that I'm able to get. But then I realized it was book three. I'm like, well, okay. So look, books one and two are also available. So there's three of my six books. And then I got some other things, right? And so those eventually came in the mail
Hmm.
and I got them. And they were intimidating on my shelf. They actually sat there for probably a year or more before I finally got to them. And I remember thinking, like, I need to read these, but I don't know, like I just wanted to get to the guy reaching for the sword and everything. I was less into the first two covers, and so I was like,
Yeah.
So it's that. But eventually, I picked it up, and of course, I devoured it, and I didn't stop. I just kept going, and fast forward a couple years, and then into college. So this into 1997, 1998. I'd read all the books probably a couple times by that point. The first seven were out. And then what happened was in preparation for book eight for Path of Daggers in 1998, um, I wanted to, I was rereading them. It was all fresh in my head. I was doing the use nets and everything else. I was online. I was throwing all my theories up there. I was reading all the theories. I was reading the Watt FAQ, which was
Mhm.
big time back then. It was the thing to do. I was contributing to it and whatever way I could. And so I wanted to talk about this. And in real life, in college, I, all my friends, they weren't really into it. And I did have a
Mhm.
roommate briefly who had read them, but he didn't talk about them as much. And so, and this happened to be at a time where I was taking a class in like basic HTML. So I'm like, okay, I had an assignment. I had to make a website. So I made a website that was Wheel of Time themed. It was ugly. And if you go back on the Wayback Machine, you might be able to find it. You might find version 2.0. Version 1.0, I've got a screenshot of it somewhere. But it even had like if you went to dragonmount.com back then,
Mhm.
day one, 24 years ago, it actually had it's like black background, white text, and said something like the only thing on the screen, just white flat text that had like you know, the wheel of time turns and ages coming past, dot, 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 and you would click continue, and then it would dissolve transition. If you had Internet Explorer 6 installed, if it didn't, it just went to, if you had Netscape, it just went to the next page. And then it's like you had to go through like two or three these things. Oh my God. You had to go through two or three of these pages before we finally got to dragonmount.com.
Mhm.
But the timing was just perfect because it was right when everybody else was reading these books. The books were blowing up in popularity.
Mhm.
Book eight, the one that came out right then, was the first one to hit the number one on the New York Times list. So it was the first one to hit number one. Um, and every single one after that hit number one right when it came out. And then also, it was right at a time where people were moving off of Usenet and getting off of AOL and getting onto the real internet. As we kind of moving into
Yeah.
web browsers. People were
Yeah.
moving off of AOL and using Netscape or Internet Explorer or something like that.
Mhm.
And so, the timing was just perfect that people were voracious. And there were other forums out there. There was a wheeloftime.com. That was a big forum that was run by the people who had the rights who were making the video game at the time,
Mhm.
and wheeloftime.org, which was just a big fan site. I don't know who ran it though. And so there were all these things. And so I put up the site. It was graphics intensive because I was a graphics guy at the time. They weren't very good graphics, but it was graphics intensive.
Mhm.
And I put up just, I don't know, a thread on each one of those websites saying, hey, come check out Dragonmount. And it just blew up in terms of population. Like people just started showing up, and under I was not prepared for the amount of people to show up on day one
Mhm.
at Dragonmount and register. Registering at the time meant like email me and I'd put you in an Excel spreadsheet. Like it was that bad on day one. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I had to figure out like a database later on. But we made do, and Dragonmount. Because of all the people helping me out, so many people that are still around today. A lot of them, and but people come and gone over the years, helped me to learn how to do a database, and helped me to host, and helped me to run the forums and the community and everything else. And then just we got in with the publisher first. We got in with Robert Jordan, and then it was really off to the races.
So that's quite an incredible story. I mean, that's wow. I mean, so for the folks at home who don't know, Jason actually had the privilege of knowing and meeting and conversing with Robert Jordan on a number of different occasions, and you still speak with Harriet quite often, from what I understand as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So with Robert Jordan, the way I met Robert Jordan was through a cease and desist letter, which was awesome. I love telling this story. And
see, I don't know the story at all. This is great.
yeah, and so it started with the cease and desist. So at the time, I was still in college. No, I graduated. I graduated from college. My degree, my undergraduate degree, was in computer graphics and animation. At the time, I wanted to do visual effects or work in a place like Pixar or something. And I live out here in Northern California, so I'm surrounded. Like, I mean, ILM is down the road, and Pixar is over there, and and so working in the movie industry was what I wanted to do, and visual effects were the skill set that I had back then. And I was not great at it, but I knew how to do 3D animation. I was very immersed in that world in terms of knowing people and everything. So I put together a team, and we were going to make an animated version of the Dragonmount prologue, with 3D animated thing. And so we went out and I put together a script, and I went out and got a couple actors to play each of the two characters, Luce Theron and Elon Morin. I got some actors to do that, and we got storyboard art and everything, and I started putting this thing together, and I was talking about it on Dragonmount, and sure enough, I get a letter in the mail saying, from Robert Jordan. It was probably his agent. I think it was probably his agent. Sent me a letter saying, dude, you can't do this. You don't have a right to do this. And I think they kind of realized I have the letter somewhere. I haven't seen it in years. I'm gonna be so disappointed in myself if I lost it, but I've got that letter, I think, somewhere. And so they essentially said, they were very cool about it. They said in print, and this letter I received in the mail, in snail mail, saying, no matter what your intention is, you cannot make this, you do not have the rights to this, to this, and please stop immediately, or we're going to take further action. If you have any questions, email us here or call us here, or whatever, right? And so I emailed, and I was very apologetic, and I knew about it, but I was trying to kind of emphasize, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this to make money. I don't have a way to make money. I'm just doing it for fun. I'm a big fan. I run this website and everything. And so they came back and they said, well, Robert Jordan is willing to give you a non-exclusive limited license to make this short film. And you can do it. And but he can pull the plug at any point. You can make no money off it. And he has to approve everything. Right. And I'm like, great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's do this. How is he going to approve everything? And he said, oh, you can just email it to him. Here's his email address. And I'm like, oh my gosh. For running a fan site, it would be like, I don't know, if someone were to give you email address for the head of Amazon Studios and Rafe Judkins at the same time, and be like, here, reach out to these guys and just talk to them.
Yeah, just talk to them. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And so I sent Robert Jordan the first email, oh man, I crafted this thing. I overcrafted it, not too long, not too short, not too friendly, not too stiff, all this kind of stuff. Had to find just the what do you even say to Robert Jordan, right? And so I emailed him, and amongst other things, I said who I was and sorry about the film thing. We'll work it out. And here's the script. What do you think? Kind of thing. And also I said, here's a picture of me at my wedding years and years and years ago, cutting the cake with a heron mark sword, right? And which I thought was kind of cool. And so he wrote back, and his first email back to me was dear Jason, and and he was like, the script is the script is well done, and it has my approval. You may proceed, or something like that. And he said something like, and best of luck in your new marriage, and hopefully your wife doesn't carve you with that sword or something like that. The marriage didn't work out long term, but she never did carve me up. But it made for a good story talking to him. And then he signed that email, Robert Jordan. And then over the next couple of years, whenever we'd email back and forth about things, he would first he signed it, sincerely Robert Jordan. And then later it was, just Robert. And then it was RJ. And then it was Jim. And I knew that once like he started signing emails, Jim. And for those who don't know, Robert Jordan is a pen name for a guy, Jim Rigney, James Rigney. He went by Jim to his family and friends. And so by the time that he was, signing his emails, Jim, we had progressed in our little email pen pal friendship, and that sometimes we were talking about the movie fizzled, we never finished it. I've got storyboards and some animatics and some animations somewhere from it and everything, but I never we never finished it, and that's okay. And he was like, no big deal, don't worry about it, it's fine. But then later, we'd start talking. He'd tell me, about where he was in his book and how far along he was. And he'd say, don't tell anyone, but I'm currently working on, a scene with this character, and it's, it's come along very well, and nothing big, but it was just nice that he was giving me a little insight,
tidbits that made you
little
happy.
tidbits, and it wasn't stuff that I was going to report on. And I don't even know if he actually even specifically told me like what characters he worked on. He would just tell me things like, "Yep, well, I'm going back to Tarvalon today. See you on the other side," or whatever, things like that. And so that was real nice. And then when he went on tours, they both for his publisher and other things, he would obviously come out to the West Coast a lot, California, and so many big stores out here on the West Coast that cater to science fiction and fantasy. So he'd come out here, and I was like, "Hey, you're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. Want to grab dinner?" And so we did that, and we did that several different times for several different events. One point, my good friend of mine worked at Pixar, and so I was like, and he was a big Robert Jordan fan as well, and so he's like, "Hey, see if you can, if you want, like, invite Robert Jordan, and we'll give him a tour of Pixar." I didn't work at Pixar, but I was like, "Hey, my buddy works there," and so we showed up, and literally a limo pulls up in front of Pixar Animation Studios, and out steps Robert Jordan and Harriet, and my friend gave us a tour. And I had done that tour so many times. It's like, "And now Jason will tell you about what we do with this department." It was kind of this surreal experience. So that evolved, and it was a real pleasure to get to know him over email, in person. Then and after he died, I went out for the funeral, and I've been in touch with Harriet over the years. I was out there last December, so a little under a year ago. I was out there for another convention. I extended the trip by a couple of days in order to stop into Charleston and see Harriet, and pay my respects at Jim's grave, and say hello to him on behalf of all of you watching. And that's what I did. I literally sat down, hunched over, cross-legged, sat down, spoke out loud, said hello to him. And I, said that on behalf of everyone here, all these people on YouTube, everywhere else, on behalf of you, that we were saying hello, and we appreciated them and missed them and everything else. Hope he's doing well.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I couldn't imagine meeting one of your heroes in person like that, and then actually talking with them, and then seeing them, and then being a part of their life, and then I don't think there's many people in the fandom that can say that, and you're definitely one of them. Definitely, you probably count on one hand the number of people that currently in the fandom.
Yeah, I mean, he met a lot of people. There were those book signings he did were huge, and there's probably a lot of people watching right now that met him through book signings and maybe some other events and everything. And that absolutely counts. He would take every book signing I ever went to of his. I went to a lot of them those years. He took the time he listened to every single person, made eye contact, and posed for pictures, and would crack jokes, and and everything else, and it really made it a special experience. There's that saying, that you say never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
and I get that. And I've met some of my other heroes, and it's been an underwhelming experience, but not Robert Jordan. That one, the guy is as larger than life, and lives up to the reputation. The first time I ever saw him was in San Jose, California, which is where I grew up. I grew up
Mhm.
in San Jose, and he was there for a book signing in a Barnes and Noble, and for Path of Daggers. I just started Dragonmount, and there was a line out the door. There were 500 people there that day, and he did a reading from Path of Daggers. So everyone crowded into this giant Barnes and Noble that was there. The
Mhm.
heyday of the big bookstores. That store's still there, so big store and everything. And he gets up there and he reads from Path of Daggers, and his voice was something else. And I know there's a couple YouTube, I know there's clips of YouTube out there and you can
Mhm.
hear his voice and everything, but to be there with him right in the microphone, his voice was something else. And he
I
spoke
imagine. Yeah.
with this thing. And I'm telling you, and the chapter he read was A Time of Iron. He read the first couple of pages of A Time of Iron, which is that chapter in Path of Daggers is where the Sanchin army is mobilizing, and the captains the commanders of the Sanchin are like plotting about, there's some Ashaman over here and everything else, and they're talking about what to do about Rand and stuff. And when he says the word, Torakin, everyone, I'm not kidding, everyone in the crowd, 500 people, kind of like look at each other like, whoa, like Torakin, you know? He doesn't say, Ashtaman. He says Ashaman. He doesn't say, Lan Mandragoran. He says Lon Mandragoran. Rand Althor. And like he would say this, there was one that like I had like goosebumps just hearing him like speak these common words. I'm like, oh my god, like it's I can say Sol Demane, or Torakin or whatever, but to hear him say it, like he put a ripple through the crowd, and it was amazing.
Wow.
And I wish I'd recorded it. I cannot believe I didn't record. I was a rookie then. I was only a couple months into Dragonmount at that point. I was only 1 month into Dragonmount. I was still a rookie mistake that and he never, that I heard, I've been to a lot of his book signings, but by then
Mhm.
they were so popular that he wouldn't do readings. Or he would do readings at some other ones, but I never got to him. The majority of
Yeah.
his book signings, he would just show up, sit down. He would say hello and be like, "Oh, the next book is coming out, whenever, or I'm working on it." He'd give a few announcements and then he'd start signing. So that was the only time I ever heard him actually perform in person anything from his books, and it was, it was amazing. I wish I recorded it, but it lives on in my
Wow.
memory. And if anyone
I
has that,
never.
I say this every time.
Yeah.
Anytime I tell this story, if you were one of the 500 people there and you happen to have a copy of it, even on like a VHS or whatever, some people had some cameras there. If anyone, this is before cell phones, if anyone has that recording, please reach out. Jason at dragonmount.com. Send me that footage.
That'd be absolutely amazing to see. I would love that. I never had the pleasure of meeting him. I never had the pleasure of going to a book signing. I live in Canada, um, and I live in the East Coast, so we don't generally get many authors at all that do book signing here, unless they're local. So I never really had the pleasure. I always wanted to, and it's really good to hear that kind of story and that the kind of person he was. I would have loved to have seen him recite passages from the books and hear him pronounce things. Now, most people watch my channel know I'm the king of mispronouncing things, and that's 100% true. I read the books for years, and I pronounce things my own way in my head. And even though I know better now, I still mispronounce shit all the time. I
It
just
still
do.
looks like
Yeah, yeah. So I think until 2 years ago, Egwene was Egwene in my mind until I heard, well, multiple people correct me and go, you're an idiot. You got to stop. So slowly I'm getting better, but yeah. So you're obviously well acquainted with the books and the show, and you're intertwined, intermeshed with the history of it. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions here. What's your favorite character? If you had to pick one character from, and we're talking book series, not show, book series only. If
Book
you had to pick one
series.
character, yeah.
So I'll caveat this by saying it's been a while since I've actually read the books. I've obviously read them many, many times and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. But in recent years, I haven't read them. I've either been reading other things or writing or whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you know, I feel like if I were to read them today, my answer would probably be very different. When I first read them, Rand was my favorite, and that's because I identified with him. I was that tall, 6'5"
Mm,
kid, and when I was a teenager, there was the girl next door, like I
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
identified with them, and that's just who I identified with and everything, and so you know, I I was a Rand fan. And actually, when Brandon wrote the books, um, I've got he put a lot of cameos in for a
Mm.
lot of fans, and of course, Matt Hatch, the innkeeper. What he did is
The
he took
Dusty
all the
Wheel,
Wheel
yeah.
of Time. Yeah, he took all the Wheel of Time, uh, well-known fan creators and put them in as innkeepers in the final three books, each one. And so, Hatch's character was named Hatch and ran the Dusty Wheel in the book. And so, Dragonmount's, what do you call it? I forget. It wasn't very good. I always I should told Brandon, I'm like, what's a better name? It's like the Happy Throng or something like that. And so, yeah. But the innkeeper was this character who resembled me, but he knew that I was a Rand fanboy for a long time. And so this innkeeper in the books has a picture of Rand on the wall. And it's like, everyone, every time, I don't know, there's a free drink or something, it's, they all hail the Dragon Reborn or something. So the, Denzel or whatever he named the character, was a Rand fanboy as well. And that's how I was immortalized in the series.
That's super
But
cool.
in my more recent reads, I really love Nynaeve. I
Hmm.
think that, I she was, when I first read it, I was like, oh, she's so mean to the kid. She's so mean to Rand and friends, and I appreciate her over time. But initially, I was like, and same thing with Egwene. I was frustrated by Egwene for so long, and I wasn't a
Hmm.
big fan of hers. I think if I were to read it today, I think my favorite character would probably be Egwene or Moraine, and
Hmm.
probably with leaning toward Egwene. I think that she really comes into the series. She is, where she starts and where she ends is a much bigger jump than Rand is always. Rand and Matt
Yeah.
Perrin have always put up on this pedestal to begin with, and they still end there. But Egwene has her shining moments, and not just a moment, but I think that one of my favorite chapters in the entire series is the Honey and the Tea chapter in Knife of Dreams, which is where I think also it's in the last book Robert Jordan wrote directly. I think it
Mm.
might be his best writing in the whole series, is that single chapter where she's converts it starts to convert all the other. She's imprisoned as an apprentice, or as a novice, excuse me,
Mm.
in the White Tower, and she is she earns everyone's respect. And at the end of the chapter, another apprentice, who had previously been mean to her, they put a little bit of honey in her tea just to show, we got you, we
Yeah,
respect you, we're on your
respect, yeah.
side. Yeah, and then that's fantastic. It's such good writing, and
I
I think, yeah.
I love Egwene. I really love Egwene, and I will say that I was never a Rand fan. Never. Not from the very first day I read the books to the last time I read them. He's not a terrible character, but he's certainly not my favorite. Not by a long stretch. But Egwene, yeah, no, 100%. There's a lot of huge Egwene fans out there,
I
and
know it.
and,
I've
and
met
and the
them.
funny thing is they're very so. Wheel of Time fans are so passionate. So if you happen to say the wrong thing about any character at all, you're gonna get piled on by dozens of or hundreds of people who really love that character. Um, but I agree with you about Nynaeve. Nynaeve, I for a very long time reading the books, I never really liked her. I always thought she was a bit of a bully. She was always very frightened and covered for that by being so angry and brash. Um, but as I get older, I appreciated her more and more. But I never actively disliked her. Now, my favorite character. I get a lot of heat for that at all times because no one likes Gowan. I think I'm one of three people in the entire fandom who like. but when I was young, for a very long time, I identified with him. He was emotional. He didn't think. He never was blatantly arrogant, but he he always thought he knew better, not because he knew better, but because he wanted to protect and help people he loved by doing what he wanted. So he's very emotional. And I thought Robert Jordan's writing of that character was amazing because most, not maybe not most, but a lot of young men are like that. They just, that's how they are. They're not perfect. They think that way, they act that way, and eventually some of them, like myself, grow out of it. Gowan never had that chance, unfortunately. I mean, he did get killed in the end, but then again, Egwene died shortly after too. So there's that. But I really do understand people's love for characters and how they identify with them. Now, with that being said, did it influence any of your own writing? So, reading the books, reading the series, is there any characters in the Wheel of Time that influenced characters in your trilogy?
So I think it's impossible to separate I think it's impossible for the Wheel of Time to have not influenced my writing. I mean,
Yeah.
it came to me at a very, at the perfect age in my life, where my own creative ideas and mine were exploding, and I was, going from, I wasn't a little kid just, scrawling in a notebook. I was a teenager scrolling in a notebook, but, with an
Mm.
eye toward, like, how do I put a character arcs? And I knew about character arcs. I started to understand story, and it was important to me to kind of do that. And so, there's I what I think Jordan is, despite that there are fact that there are, if I can be objective about it, there are, um, some of his characters, some of the ways, right, some of his tropes, some of his characterizations, are not the best. Some of them are outdated now, of course, and
Hmm.
but by and large, when he was at his best, I think he did fantastic characterization. That's what I mean. That's what, when you really get down to it, that's why people love this series so much. It's the characters.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a cool world, and there's detail, and the plot's kind of interesting and fun, and it is, wonderful and interesting and everything. But
A lot of
really, at the
skirt
heart of it,
smoothing
it
and
yeah, it's the characters. And like,
yeah.
I've had thousands and thousands of these conversations over the years, and every time, it's just your one of your first questions was, who's your favorite character? Everyone wants to know. Everyone has their favorite.
Yeah.
It's the
And it's
character we're
always
passionate
character based. Like the show itself is, or so sorry, the
about.
books itself, they're character based books.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why they did so well and why so many people identify with them.
Yeah.
It's
And
that's why I like
so
them.
yeah, and so, Jordan, his characters they feel very real, in that they've got
Hmm.
quirks, they're not flat, they're very dynamic. And so, more than anything else, there was no one that is specifically, like, just lifted out and
Yeah.
recreated, right? I do have a character, that, the Green Man, but that is not, yeah, that's a little bit of a hat tip to Robert Jordan, but that's about it. That's more, I drew more from the Celtic,
Yeah.
Green Man. So it's like Jordan and I went to the same source, but, yeah, I did it a little bit intentionally to kind of, tip my hat to that. But that character was going to be there anyway.
Hmm.
More importantly, I think, is that the Wheel of Time taught me the importance of having those character quirks. And so I don't have braid tugging and skirt smoothing and, that kind of staring at people's calves. But I do. I was. I've always made sure to make sure that my characters do have little personality quirks, both some that are charming, some that are annoying.
Hmm.
If I want a character to be likable, I'll give them a quirk, and I try to, um, remember those lessons. I go back frequently,
Yeah.
and I think, subconsciously, I should say, I go back and I think about, like, what was it about this character in the Wheel of Time that I loved? How can I replicate that feel, if not that character? So,
Yeah.
I like to think that, the characters in my novel, I don't have thousands of them. I've got a smaller cast in the series, and that's by design. And it certainly grows as the books grow. In the
Hmm.
first one, there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 named characters total. And that was very much by design in that first book. Um, and so, but I wanted each one of them to kind of shine on their own. And it was really, it came from that idea of Robert Jordan and the way that he approached character.
That's super cool. So again, folks at home, link is down below if you folks want to pick those up. They are on sale this month, $2.99 for the first two books. Excellent reads, all of them. Now we're going to change gears just a little bit. We're gonna leave the books, and we're gonna move into the show. So the show has sort of taken over the hearts and minds, good and bad. A lot of the fandom. There's a lot of people who unequivocally love it and say it is the best thing ever, and there's a lot of people who revile the show too. And there's a lot of people that are in between that enjoy the show for what it is, but also love the books. So when I first watched the show, I was excited and nervous and all sorts of emotions because for me, the Wheel of Time has been such a big part of my life. The books have, and I was scared that it wouldn't do it justice. I think by and large, for myself at least anyway, and everyone has their own personal opinions on it, I think it did a very good job in certain aspects and kind of fell short in others. But what did you think? So what were your first thoughts when you first sat down and watched the first episode? Good or bad? I mean, no judgment here whatsoever.
No, it was a thumbs up for me in the first time. So the first time I saw it, I wasn't able to talk about it at the time, but Amazon flew me on down to do a special screening, and so I went down with to Los Angeles with Kitty Rallo, and who was on my team, and she lives down there, and so I called her up, I was like, "Hey, Kitty, want to go see Wheel of Time in the theater right now with me?" She's like, "What?" So we went down, we saw the first episode, and I had a chance to meet Rafe and some of the other people that were involved in the show, and that was really great. I wasn't nervous. Um, so I have some experience working in film. I have some experience in working in film adaptation specifically. For a while, I was working to help to create a treatment for adapting The Eye of the World into a feature-length movie. This is back in like the 2009, 2010. And
Yep.
so, back before TV blew up in a cool way. And so, I had gone through the thought exercise of like, what does it take to adapt this thing? And I knew that there was going to be changes. I knew going in that there were going to be big things. I knew going in that I had to set aside the books. And I mean, I know we're adapting the books, but at the same time, I went in and I promised myself that there would be no sacred cows and that I would just love it for what it is. And I have always and still do think that, that the filmmakers, that their hearts are in the right place. I think that Rafe has this near impossible task of being able to please. Actually, it is an impossible task of pleasing everyone. I mean, he is without a doubt a genuine fan, as big of a fan as you or I or anyone who's watching this. He is a genuine fan of the show, despite what people accuse him of, or whatever. He does not have an agenda and all these things. And if you think that his tweets are saying he has an agenda, then you're missing the point, dude. You're missing the joke, and the joke's literally on you. But I'm a big believer in that, like I want to uplift other people's art, and like I can appreciate, like, yes, it's not going to be a faithful adaptation, and I promise you that if you were to take those those books and adapt them word for word directly or whatever and put them verbatim onto the screen, you are going to be disappointed. I promise you will. You will fall asleep at so many of these things, and it does not. There has to be changes. And so, and also going in, I knew, for instance, that Moraine, Rosamund Pike, and Daniel Henney are the highest paid people on that list. And that call sheet every day when they look at it says, actor number 1 is Rosamund Pike, actor number 2 is Daniel Henney.
And they will use them, every time.
By contract, they have to be in the most scenes in the series. For this show to get made, for the show to exist, Moraine and Lan had to be the biggest names. It had to be in the most scenes. It doesn't mean that it's going to always be about them. It doesn't mean that the long-term story is going to focus exclusively on them. It just means that we're going to get more of them. And I think too that now that we've seen it, I think we're going to see more of it too. I think in season 2 and 3, we're going to see just as much of them, and that means less time for other things in the books. So
I think without getting into leaks, I think Rafe has actually said on social media a number of times that Great Hunt doesn't have much with Moraine in it. It doesn't, not really. And they had to.
She's in like 2 chapters.
Yeah, and they had to. Like they had to. I don't want to use the word invent, but I want to say extend and extrapolate upon her storyline to keep her central to the story, and I'm okay with
Yeah,
that. Like that's
yeah, it just
it's
it
gonna
is what
happen.
it is.
Yep.
So when I showed up in LA in this small little theater with Kitty, and we sat down, and Rafe's, 3 rows behind me or whatever, I could feel like looking at the back of my head, like, how are they reacting? you know. Um, I thought it was cool. I loved, it was on big screen, and
Mhm.
the Trollocs looked awesome, and the channeling looked awesome, and it, seeing the two rivers, like, seeing Rand there, like I felt like at one point I was 14 again, and I was seeing Rand, hanging out on the rocks and looking out of the big, you know, uh, the valley, and the fog rolling in and everything. I talked to Uta Riesewitz, who was the director of that episode. She was
Mhm.
there, and she was telling me that shot of Rand where you see him sitting on the rocks, and all the smoke. He's up in the hills, and the fog is in. And she said that they had one, like, it was just perfect timing. They said it was a completely foggy day. They couldn't get anything, and then suddenly the fog cleared, and they're like, quick, grab it. So he, like, Yosha Stradowski, who plays Rand, he ran out there, sat down the rock, they filmed it, they got the shot, and the fog came in and it was gone. And they had one shot, one take, and that's all they got, that whole time there. And it was like the most beautiful thing. And so,
That's awesome.
yeah. So, it was a thumbs up for me.
Mhm.
The whole season in general, like you, there are some parts that I liked.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff that didn't really work for me.
Mhm.
Like a lot of people, I think that, just the struggle with the pandemic, and hurry up and the change that needed to happen, everything. The season finale it fell flat for me. I mean, I can appreciate what they were doing, and I also suspect that it felt like, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to that. I mean,
Yeah.
Rafe, I don't think, has final cut on these things, and I know for a fact, that there are several things, in lots of episodes that were not his choice to make, and that he
Yep.
got overruled and vetoed, and that's just the nature of the business.
Yeah. I
And
think I
so,
think a lot of people seem to think that a showrunner has final say, and that may be true
and I
in
don't.
some instances, maybe.
That
But
is
you're
not
talking,
understanding. Yeah,
but
it's
not
very, very, very rare.
very rare. And they have to be very big names, have the control built into their contracts, and Rafe didn't have
Yeah.
that. So when you say many cooks in the kitchen, that is, from everything I've heard, 100% correct. And there were a lot of instances where it is the way it is. There are people that think they know better that maybe don't,
Yeah.
and then they
And
take it and work with what they can, and they build it into the show and try to work around it. So, and I think they do a good job
yeah,
of that.
and the things that I think, I mean, I think, the scripts could be a little bit different, but I know there's notes coming from a million people and everything, and there's, choices. But I think that the show looks wonderful. It
Mm-hmm.
would be nice if they had Lord of the Rings budget, but at the same time,
Yes.
the Lord of the Rings budget is so far beyond that. Like, I would imagine, that there's probably there would expectations would come with that sort of money. And
Yes.
right now, the Wheel of Time season one overperformed, and
Mm-hmm.
Rings of Power, as of right now or whatever, and we're recording this a little bit in advance. Wink, wink behind the curtain, right? We're recording this a little bit in advance, uh, but Rings of Power is doing very well, of course, but it's also, I don't know if it's hitting where they wanted it to for that level of budget. And so, if Wheel of Time is punching above its weight, and then that's pretty good. Like, the fact that
Yeah.
it was doing phenomenal in terms, like, it exceeded its expectations in terms of its ratings, and its the
Mm-hmm.
viewership and everything else. So that's wonderful. And now that
And
Rings of Power
it's
is out,
having
of
a,
course, we've been,
yeah, resurgence now because of Rings of
yeah,
Power.
we've
Yeah.
seen that resurgence. Yeah. Yeah. And I found it's funny. I got done watching the most recent episode of Rings of Power,
Oh, hello,
here visiting.
puppers.
Yeah. Hello. This is Sammy. And Sammy's nosing in. When I got done watching the latest episode of Rings of Power, I was done. I was kind of, thinking about it or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I came on and said, up next is, Wheel of Time or whatever, recommended for you again. I don't really watch it, but I thought, I kind of feel like rewatching it, just as, like, purely as a
Yeah.
fan, like, not to analyze it, not to, like, you know, dig deep and try and remember all the behind the scenes
Just
stuff.
to
And I
enjoy.
know this kind of, just to watch it and enjoy it, yeah. So that was it, and I did, I went back and I enjoyed it. And so, yeah, the
I
episodes, they're familiar to me now, and
Yeah,
they are what
and
they
they
are.
hit just a
I'm
little
really
bit
excited
different
for
on your
season two.
second or or third or fourth watch. They're a little bit different because you understand what's coming. It's not new. There's no anticipation. It's like reading the books. You see other things. And I've had, I think, in the last few weeks since Rings of Power have been out, I've had a couple dozen messages from people, all new to my channel, all new subscribers. So hello to you all. Thank you very much for subscribing to the channel in the last couple weeks. But they found me and they found Wheel of Time through Rings of Power. So they had no idea. They had no idea Wheel of Time was a thing. They had no idea. They're all fantasy fans, obviously, and they would have been excited for it. But one of the other things I think where Amazon failed, and this is the company, this is not the people making the show, this is not the showrunner, this is not the actors and actresses, this is not the crew, this is not the caterers, this is the executives. They fell flat when it came to marketing, because no one knew the show was out. No one knew, like, not really, like, they marketed The Boys, they marketed all their other big things in a certain way, and Wheel of Time didn't get the same treatment, because I don't think they thought that it would do as well as it did. And it did so well in spite of the marketing and not because it. So this resurgence, all these people are finding it now, and it's getting such big viewership again. They all would have watched the first time, I think. And I'm hoping they learned their lesson there, and they thought, well, now we can make money. And I'm hoping we see more for that for season 2.
Yeah, and too, I think I know Amazon Prime Video is not a they're not rookies, right? But at the same time,
No.
they're still a fairly young studio in the grand scheme of things. I think that they are largely figuring this stuff out, still as they go. Yes, they've had shows, they've had The Boys for a while, Miss Maisel, and so many. They've had a lot of hits.
They're not on Netflix's level or even Disney Plus's level just yet. They're
and
not there. They're getting there,
and they're getting there, and you can see and I think that some of the bigger names are like, you can practically, as I follow them in the trades, and you probably see it even more than I do because you're even more plugged into what's going on, and on a minute by minute basis with someone, studio level and everything else, which is great. But I really feel like I am like watching some of these executive careers evolve before my eyes. Like,
yes.
I'm really starting to see them, and seeing like their shows and seeing how their shows are progressing and changing and getting better. So I'm excited for season 2. And one other thing I'll say about the show too is, season 1 was book 1, right? More or less. It was an adaptation of, I know they brought it up, but by and large, it was the story of the Eye of the World, which is a 32-year-old book that used tropes that were effective in 1990 that are less effective 32 years later. And honestly, of the 14 Wheel of Time books, it's not the best. It's not the best. Like, it's not the fastest pace. It's a little messy. And the ending was tacked on. I mean, I say that respectfully to Robert Jordan, but it was like, as a right, and I mean that literally. Like, so people may not know this, but initially, Robert Jordan went to the publisher and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for this thing called The Wheel of Time. It's gonna be 3 books." And they laughed at him. They said, "No, we know how you write. Here's a contract for 6. Take it." And so he did a contract for 6 books. And the original concept was, Rand was going to take Kalendor at the end of book 1. And so he was marching on, like he was writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. Finally, I don't know, it was Harriet or somebody else took a look and said, "Hey, like, Jim, you're at 300,000 words. You need an ending." He's like, "Well, he hasn't even got the fall me yet." I'm not, I'm not there. And so that is partially why that in the story that they do that left turn, like they get to Camelin and then he's like, "Crap, I need an ending." So they take a little teleport system, over to to the Blight, and they resolve that book there. And so it is literally tacked on. I said it respectfully, but you can tell the quality of that writing, the adventure and everything else is not as good as it is in later books. It's confusing and feels a little rushed. It's because
100%.
he was a younger writer and he had to wrap it up and he had to move on, so he had to find an ending that worked. So when you're adapting that, all of the Rafe and the writers, they inherit those challenges. They inherit those problems from the book. There are ways to smooth it over and make it better, of course, but it's they still have to deal with the fact that you're going to the eye. You have to explain what the eye of the world is, or re-explain it, or reinvent it, or whatever. And it's, you have to, in this introducing, Ishamael, introducing the man, or whatever they call him in the show, the stranger, or the man,
Yeah.
or what, no, strangers rings of power. What do they call him in the, what was his official name in the,
just the man, I think. Just the man.
man. Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's like, these are things that, like, they were awkward in the book, and they become an awkward writing problem for the writing team. And you can see them trying to preserve what they can here, but it is a little
And
awkward.
you couple with that with the fact that it's the first season of a multi-season fantasy show. They have to build the world too, and they have to try to explain some things. And they know the focus of the entire book series in the world, or this show in the world, is going to be the White Tower. So that's where we have those two episodes in the middle that are brand new, and that a lot of people that really enjoy the books and didn't enjoy the show so much. That's part of the reason they say that. But I like those episodes because I like seeing new stuff. But it did a very good job explaining some of the Tower politics. It did a good job explaining relationships and how the warders work.
Yeah.
And then you had the designated mourner at the end, which I thought was very powerful. People didn't like that. Some people didn't like that, rather. But it helped build the foundation for later seasons, and that stuff like that had to be done. And of course, that's going to
be
take
done. And it's also the strength of the the White Tower and the Aes Sedai and those plot lines. That's one of the strengths of the Wheel of Time, and that's what. And if you were to not introduce one of the best parts of the series until season 4 or 5 or whatever it would have been,
you may not get there.
I guess it would be season 2, but still, like, to not have Tarvalon, featured in some way, is it would be a mistake not to do that. And that was something that we knew going back a decade when we were adapting the book and looking for treatments and pitching it to studios and stuff. The people that had the rights and were working on it then, it was known then, and that was the first thing that the studios asked is, what makes this different? And if you just say, oh, well, our first season is going to feature a bunch of farm boys and they're going to go on an adventure, that's just like, but with a female Gandalf only, that's the big differentiating factor.
Yeah,
they get run out the door. The show would never be made. But if you come in and you pitch, what makes the Wheel of Time work, and it's this collective. It isn't just about one hero, the chosen one. It's about a collective group of people saving the world in their various and different roles. It's about the world saving itself and coming together. And not always messy. It's all messy, but they ultimately have to come together to stop this great force. There's not just one person doing the job. And you got the tower and the politics and the warders, and this is what makes the Wheel of Time unique. And that's what the studio, and that's what I know there's people out there who want the books, and that I respect that view.
Books are still there, though.
But in the grand scheme of literally hundreds of millions of potential viewers out there, or whatever, what people want are going to be these things that are different and unique and compelling. And so that's what I think. It wasn't always done perfectly, but I think that there was clear effort and intention on behalf of the writers and the team of people making the show to do that. And that's why I can watch that first episode down in LA and I can pick it apart and I can be like, oh, I didn't like that part, or that plot line of Nynaeve getting dragged away didn't quite work for me, or whatever. I can pick apart that stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm like, somebody who loves the books, a lot of people love the books, came together, dove through and ruined the spines of many, many, many books to get details and costumes right, and brought fantastic professional world-class acting performances to these characters.
100%, yes.
This is it, man. This is the Wheel of Time. It's the Wheel of Time, with a lot of money thrown at it. This is awesome.
And it's only going to get better as we go on. They're going to get more money.
It's only going to get better. This is season 1.
It's only going to get better. Yeah, it's just season 1. So I won't take up much more of your time. We've been talking for quite some time now, but I want to thank you so much for coming here. And I do want to remind everyone at home about your books. So again, October 11th, today is the release date of the 3rd book. Link is down below. Please check it out. Absolutely a treasure. If you got it there yet, there you go. Mystic Skies.
Nice, shiny.
Look at that shiny woman in blue in the front too, oddly enough. Very cool. Very neat. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, Jason. I really do appreciate it. I had fun talking with you. And
John, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if anyone wants, the links are below, or you can just go to my website, jasondenzel.com. There's even a book trailer there if you want to kind of.
I'll leave that down below too. So
series is. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, wicked. Well, thanks so much for being here, and thank you all at home for sticking with us here to the very end. And here's to many more.